Walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road to the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and whether that statue of a faun playing a flute looks eerily familiar. At a corner table by the fire are three people. One of them is uneasy about the giant albatross circling the pub. And that's me, Matthew Mellema, and welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Here at Believe to See, we explore the relationship between faith, art, and storytelling. Our goal is to help you connect the great story, the great stories, and our own stories in order to understand what it means to live with a Christian imagination. And today, we're going to have sort of a Believe to See book club. Our topic book is maybe my favorite novel of recent years, Piranesi. And it's written by maybe my favorite living author, Susanna Clarke. So now let me make my super duper official warning. We're going to give lots and lots and lots of spoilers for this book. And because it is an absolute joy to read Piranesi for the first time, knowing as little as possible, and let those mysteries slowly unravel as the information gathers like fish in a net. That's looking ahead to the book content. I want to give you every opportunity to avoid the spoilers. Okay, so here we go. If you have not yet read Piranesi, well, first of all, you're in for a treat. If you're the sort of person who is listening to this podcast, then you probably love great stories and the Christian imagination. And guess what? That means you're probably going to love Piranesi. So right now, just pause this podcast, read Piranesi, and then come back here for the book club discussion. You can thank me later. All right. So now let's introduce the fellow participants for our Piranesi book club. Mandy, how are you doing?
I am good. I'm so excited to talk about this book, whether it's Piranesi, Piranesi, or Piranesi, whatever.
Oh gosh, now I'm all self-conscious about it.
Well, because I'd heard it pronounced two different ways, so I Googled it, and apparently it's from the Greek, and it's Piranesi. So I was saying it Piranesi, but maybe
so it's Piranesi.
Yeah, Piranesi.
Okay. Piranesi.
I don't know.
Okay. So,
are y'all Italian or Greek? I'm sorry. Just said.
Well, Piranesi.
I know. I just made it sound Italian.
The man Piranesi was Venetian, so that would be Italian. But maybe the name is originally Greek. So,
well, if it were Italian,
I thought it was originally Greek. But you are so right that
maybe it is. Maybe the Italian is a better argument for Piranesi. But I just want to say, just in case, I just want to make another plug for anyone who just ignored Matthew. This is very important. If you ignored Matthew and you are still listening and you have not read this book, you need to stop the recording now. I know you love us. We are wonderful. You know, it's really fun to listen to us babble on about things, but you really do need to stop, because the best thing about reading this book is that you have no idea what the heck is happening, and you're figuring out as you go. And it's not a long book. I literally read it in 2 days. And by 2 days, I mean half an hour one day and then the whole rest of the next day. So please.
In that whole next day, it was very entertaining for me because Mandy was like live texting me as she was reading it. So I was getting all of her updates as she was going. It was really funny.
Hey, I was pretty close with some of my theories.
You were on the right track. You were on the right track.
Yeah.
And our other co-host today, she kind of broke etiquette by talking before being introduced, but that's okay. I'll overlook it.
I'm sorry.
It's Christina Brown. Christina, how are you?
I'm great, and also very excitable about this whole novel, which is why I broke etiquette, because I really desperately want to agree and say, yes, if you have not yet read it, turn this podcast off and go read it before you listen, because it's just too good. I was talking to my husband the other night and counting on my hands, like the number of novels that I've read in the last 5 years that I couldn't put down, you know, the ones that are not like, oh, this is a good story, but, you know, I'm tired and I'm going to go to bed or whatever. But, you know, the ones that I literally am like, oh, dang it, it's midnight. Oh, just one more chapter, like the ones you really need to put down. And this was among them. So please, if you have not read it, stop immediately.
No,
Go read it.
I stopped to put eye drops in like 3 times just so I could keep reading.
Oh, I love this.
I'm totally serious. And like Peter was sitting next to me. He was doing some work and stuff. He was sitting next to me toward the end of the day when I was like plugging through. And I was like, oh, my eyes. He's like, why don't you stop reading? And I'm like, no.
Peter, you don't get it.
I know. Trust me. I have been like basically following him around the house. Like I put the book on the coffee table in front of where he sits after I finished it. And then that night I kept going, hey. And he's like, yeah, we're watching Better Call Saul. What's your problem? And then the next day I'm like, okay. You really have to read. He's like, I'm reading that other book you told me to read. I'm like, well, hurry up because I need to ask you about Piranesi.
That's so good.
So it goes. All that is to say, we all really love this book, and we all really want to talk about it. So, but before we do that and dive into some of the themes and some of the other stuff that we all want to talk about, let me sort of set the background for this book because I think this book has an interesting history of how it came to be. So its author is, just you wait. A combination of an internet article / maybe some Wikipedia. But whatever. So Susanna Clarke, she, before this, had only written one other novel, and that's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, published in 2004. And if you've listened to this podcast, you probably heard, I friggin' love that book. It's one of my favorite books in the world. I love it so much. But that was a very unusual book for a lot of reasons. She spent the process of like writing, getting a post was about a decade. So she started about 93, finally comes to being in 2004. It's a gigantic book. It's a really sprawling story with lots of characters. It's this alternative history of England where there's magic. So it's a delightful and charming book. I can't recommend it highly enough. And it's a weird book, but it's great. And here's the thing. It got both critical and commercial success. Like, critics loved it, and it was on the New York Times bestseller list for a long time. It was super popular. Neil Gaiman said that it was, quote, unquestionably the finest English novel of the fantastic written in the last 70 years. Wow. So high praise. And I think that's warranted. It was just a really, really terrific book. So 2004. So then let's go to the next 16 years, because Piranesi was her second novel and was published in 2020. So in those intervening 16 years, she ends up getting diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. She has some symptoms that are similar to like agoraphobia, she said. So she found herself just unable to write. Like she intended to write a sequel to Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. And she said in an interview, it's like, yeah, I got there and I couldn't make any decisions about what the characters do. I couldn't make decisions about how to end a sentence. I just couldn't do it. Wow. So eventually, despite the fact that her debut novel was both a critical darling and a commercial blockbuster, she eventually reaches the point where she admits she lost her confidence as an author. And she basically stopped viewing herself as an author, which is just totally mind-boggling. So eventually, she reaches the point where she decides to write this very, very different book from Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, Piranesi, which she says was an idea that she thinks predated Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So this is a very old, discarded idea. So this is one of these many unfinished projects that all of us writers have. And one of the reasons she chose to write this book is because she thought it would be simpler. There's fewer characters and she wouldn't have to do a whole bunch of research. So she goes ahead and writes it, and surprise, surprise, it's another masterpiece. Like, she's 2 for 2 on the masterpiece scale.
Do you know I thought this was... I'm sorry, how long did it take her to write Piranesi?
I don't have that, but I get the impression it did not take her nearly as long as Jonathan Strange. So like and also like Piranesi's a much slimmer book. Like Piranesi's like barely 300 pages.
Right.
Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell is gigantic. Like you could bludgeon a cow to death with it. But again, Piranesi, it's another huge success. I thought this was hilarious. So I was reading the Wikipedia article to get some background, and Wikipedia's line was, Piranesi received reviews of unanimous admiration. This is like, wow, that's high praise, Wikipedia. Unanimous admiration. But yeah, I thought this. I got this other quotation from this article. It's Sarah Didum of the Times. She said, "quote After all that time, she has produced a second novel that is close to perfect," and I think that's kind of spot on. So this is just a really startling and wonderful little book, and yeah, let's just friggin' talk about it now. So Mandy, would you like to start? If you want to give maybe your 30,000 foot view of what you thought stood out to you about the book.
Well, first, I do feel it's important to say that Evangeline, our other co-host, also absolutely adores this book. She couldn't be part of the podcast tonight, but I think that's important because all three of y'all read it, and you were like, Mandy,
we were giving you a pretty long and dedicated pressure campaign.
Yes,
it was, and it was one of the recent podcasts. Unfortunately, I apologize.
No, that's okay.
And that just shows. You know, it's a lesson all the kids out there. Give in to peer pressure, right?
Yeah, there it is.
Oh, good job, Matthew.
Hey, if you have the right peers, then yes.
There you go.
Yes. No, I will say when I was talking to a friend of the podcast, Sarah Pottinger, about this yesterday. When I read the first page, I was like, this is not my kind of book. What on earth? But thankfully, I had promised y'all. I mean, I'm not going to give up on a book after a first page anyway. But I was like, wow, I don't know if this is my kind of book, because it starts out and you're immediately in this head of this person, maybe, you don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so from the first page, I was like, I'm really not sure this is my thing. I'm going to be the odd man out in the podcast group, the podcast cool kids. They're not going to let me at the cool table anymore. But then by the time I was like halfway through page 2, I was like, yeah, I don't have any idea what's going on, but I don't care. And I just kept reading. And I think the magic of the book is that Susanna Clarke, whatever. Was that it? Sorry.
You got it. Susanna Clarke.
Okay. Good. I like her so much. I forgot her name. I think she has accomplished something magical in that she has balanced keeping the reader confused, but not frustrated. And so you were just confused enough that you are absolutely in love with this narrator, who is the absolute quintessential unreliable narrator of unreliable narrators of all time.
Right.
But
yet you love him.
You what?
Sorry, I was just taking a drink of water. I said, and yet, because you're completely right. And I said, and yet you love him. You
love him, and you trust him. Even though you know he's confused, but so are you. And so you might as well just go for the ride. And
trust him.
And it is the word that kept coming up to me when I was reading it, is I was like, my brain felt good. Is it? Like my brain was so happy. Like, and the word that kept coming up to me was delicious. It was a delicious experience to have my brain, I don't know, confused but not frustrated.
It's interesting. I actually completely understand exactly what you're saying.
Well, there you go. Yay.
Yeah. I 100% agree.
You're not even confused, let alone frustrated.
Nope.
So, I mean, Susanna Clarke, I am sure you are listening to this.
Oh,
so
sure.
if for the second reprinting, if you want that blurb by Mandy Houck, Reading Piranesi made my brain feel good. Author Mandy Hauk. So I was just throwing it out there.
You don't
But
know.
I totally agree with you, Mandy, in that was especially early on in the book. It's such a hard line to walk because I remember when after I read it, I was told Danielle to read it, and as she's starting it, I told her, it's like, okay, sweetie, first like 20, 25 pages, you're gonna have no clue what's going on.
Right.
That's okay. Just roll with it, soak in it for a little bit, and it'll all make sense gradually, sort of. But even if it doesn't make sense, it'll be good. And that is so hard to confuse the reader, but still keep them going. That is so hard to do.
I have no idea. I think it's really, I don't know, Christina, don't you think it's just because he was so engaging? Do you think that's what?
You know, it's interesting. I've thought about it so many times because unreliable narrators, you often don't trust them, but you sort of have this innate trust for this, narrator. You're almost on his side, but you're also really skeptical. You're like, dude, you're weird, but also keep talking because I'm with you,
Right.
And I have thought about that too. It's like, how did Clarke do this? How did she set up such an unreliable narrator that you identify with and trust like immediately?
I wonder if it's because he's endearing. That just occurred to me.
See, I thought about that too, but I don't know. He's because I definitely found myself getting annoyed with him several times. Of course, dude,
I did it.
ask the question, but he is endearing, yes, kind of, sort of. But you're also wondering, is this guy like crazy? Like legitimately, like is he insane? Like you're just not.
I think he was endearing, even though I did think he was insane. The first text that I texted Matthew, okay, and here come the real spoilers. So if you have ignored us up until now, turn it off.
You can skate by until now, but here they come.
Yeah, it's over now. You made your choice. Okay. Right around page 40, 45, the first thing that I texted to Matthew was, I think he's in an asylum and the other is his therapist.
Oh, it's so interesting.
So to me, I did think he was crazy because clearly, he's not sane. However, I think what was endearing to me about him is his absolute love for the world and his wonder. The way he looked at everything with such wonder. And so it helped you not be cynical about his confusion because he's so absent of cynicism.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that stuck out to me. And I was reading an article in Plow by a friend of Anselm, Joy Clarkson, and she brought home this point. Like, you can even go back to the very first chapter. So it's like, 2 pages in a line, where basically Piranesi goes, he wants to watch the convergence of 3 floods happening in a hallway. Something goes unexpected. He almost drowns. He only saves himself by like randomly grasping onto like a statue.
A finger.
A finger. And where all the rest of us would be going, oh my gosh, and like being really upset about it. His conclusion after being saved by grabbing onto this finger of the statue is, quote, "The beauty of the house is immeasurable, its kindness infinite." And like that is the attitude that Piranesi has that saturates the entire account. And I think that's one of the things that makes it so fascinating. He says in another section where he's talking to the other, and the other, gives him what we find out is like a derisive name, Piranesi. But Piranesi says to himself, like, I don't really think of myself as that. I think of my identity as I'm a beloved child of the house. And again, that is the lens that he views everything through. And that is sort of what we as the reader gradually grow into too.
Yeah, I think if I were to sort of alter my original answer, Mandy, not to like disagree with myself, although I do that all the time. I do think that there is an endearing part of him, but that's kind of what I was like alluding to with like the trustworthiness, but the sincerity, right? He was, you can tell that he's so sincere, and also immediately, he's a lover of beauty. And you can just
Yes.
tell that he has a deep appreciation for things that go unnoticed by a lot of people and just a lot of like us in the 21st century, right? And this is interesting because you had mentioned page 45 and that's kind of when you're thinking like, oh, maybe is he like, I don't know. But on page 39, he starts, this is when it goes to the albatross. It says, entry for the 11th day of the 6th month in the year the albatross came to the southwestern halls. And he says, this is how he talks. He says, as well as my regular meetings with the other and the quiet consolatory presence of the dead, there are the birds. Birds are not difficult to understand. Their behavior tells me what they are thinking. Generally, it runs along the lines of, is this food? Is this? What about this? This might be food. I'm almost certain that this is. Or occasionally, it is raining. I do not like it.
I love
While ample for a brief neighborly exchange, such remarks do not suggest a broad or deep intelligence, yet it has occurred to me that there may be more wisdom in birds than appears at first sight, a wisdom that reveals itself only obliquely and intermittently.
Mm-hmm.
And right there, this character is having this profound statement in complete innocence. You know what I'm saying? And also like nonsensical, like ness.
Yeah, he almost seems like an Adam character, where it's like he's sort of this steward of the house. He's very much a part of the house, but he sort of has this this sort of mastery over the house, but that he has this mastery over the house so that he can care for it. And
but his attitude is still that he's less than the house at the same time.
Yeah, he's sort of master of the house, but he's also a beloved child of the house, right? Yes. And I think it's very interesting to see his attitude as juxtaposed against the other's attitude, right? Mm-hmm. Because again, Piranesi, he is a beloved child of the house. His goal, he says in one passage, is to map as many of the rooms and hallways of the house as he can in his lifetime. He says in a different passage where he supposes that the house is infinite, like there's literally no end to it. So you could view that as a pointless goal to explore as much of it as you could. But no, his attitude is like, no, this house is a treasure. I'm going to map and learn as much about it as I can. So that's what he does. He does it from this posture of awe, from this posture of wanting to learn. And he does it as very much a part of this world. He's a child of the house. He's intertwined with the world that to him is filled with meaning. And you juxtapose that against the other who views the house as potentially a source of some great secret power. He doesn't care about the house. He doesn't live in the house. He can only survive by bringing stuff from outside the house. He just wants the power. And that juxtaposition is so stark, in the way that Clarke plays that out is so good.
Yeah, and
Matthew, can I just ask really quick, Matt, for you to, for those annoying listeners who have decided to keep on carrying on without actually having read the book.
I don't want to cater to them. They were warned.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know you don't want to cater to them, but I mean, I don't know. I feel like maybe we should. Maybe they're on a treadmill and they couldn't. Maybe they couldn't stop their podcast, so they're helping. Okay. And yeah. So can you give just like a brief, not necessarily, well, maybe a summary, but just like we keep referencing the house and the other, and just kind of.
I would love to.
Yeah.
Okay. The world that Piranesi lives in. It is a house with very high ceilings, with many rooms in many long hallways with big columns and staircases. Each of these hallways is filled with giant statues of all these wondrous things. There's a faun playing the flute. There's a fox teaching little bunnies how to read. Also, there's minotaurs. There's all sorts of fantastical things. So many, all the statues you can imagine. So that is on the one level. On the bottom level, it is filled with an ocean. The house has like an ocean, and the tides go up and down. There's fish in there that Piranesi can catch with his nets. In the top floor, floor number 3 is clouds. So there's all these clouds, there's rain, and it's sort of this cycle. He can't see outside the house. The only thing he can see through the windows is like all these courtyards. And as far as he knows, that is the extent of the cosmos. And as far as he knows, there have only ever been 15 human beings. There's him, there's the other, and then there are the skeletons of 13 other humans, which he very conscientiously cares for and oversees.
Correct. And as the readers, we do not know what the time period is.
Yep.
It's just his entries. We don't know where this is set, what's happening, what year it is. And so that's something that we keep discovering.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I also, back to what you were saying, because I wanted to bring this up earlier, like when you said there, as far as he knows, only 15 people that have existed, that's part of the endearing quality of Piranesi, whatever, because he, at one point, when he's listing them, 1, 2, and then 3 through 8 or whatever, and then he gets to 16 and he's like, you. And so he's writing the journal for us, whoever that is. And so to me, the fact that he is at the same time so intent on gathering knowledge and information, he is also completely comfortable with mystery. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's the magic of the book. Everything is like a contrast and a balance, like the confusion, but not frustration. And Piranesi's love of the house, and he's master of the house, but he's servant of the house. And he wants all this knowledge, and that's his life's work, is to gather knowledge and try to make sense of things. But then at the same time, there's so many things that you as the reader are like, dude, you're so not understanding that the other is malevolent. And where did he get the multivitamins he's bringing you? And what are they? And it's just fascinating. It's just fascinating. And it makes my brain feel good.
Yeah, so again, I'm cribbing this from the article Joy Clarkson wrote from Plow, but she gives quotation that Susanna Clarke gave in an interview where, again, she talks about one of the influences was Owen Barfield, who had this sort of theory about how modern humanity, as we're getting better at controlling the physical world, it ironically deprives that world of meaning. So here's how Clarke explained it. One of Barfield's ideas was that people in the past related to the world in quite different ways than we do now. Ancient peoples did not feel alienated from their surroundings the way in which we sometimes do. They did not see the world as meaningless. They saw it as a great and sacred drama in which they took part. Barfield called this idea original participation, and I tried to describe this sort of relationship in Piranesi's attitude to the house. So again...
He nailed it. That's exactly... Wow.
Mission accomplished. And sort of along those lines, I'd like to spend a little bit of time on the influences that Susanna Clarke mentioned in the book. Anselm readers will be able to spot some of these quite easily. So like one of the most profound influences was definitely C.S. Lewis, particularly Chronicles of Narnia, Magician's Nephew. Like the sort of opening quotation of the book is a quotation from the Magician's Nephew. Let me find it. So it's what the magician, sort of Diggory's evil uncle, says. I am the great scholar, the magician, the adept, who is doing the experiment. Of course I need subjects to do it on. So that is, like I said, the evil uncle in Magician's Nephew. But that obviously is in reference to the other in this book.
Yes.
Who sort of takes the opposite view of Piranesi. He is alienated from the house. He doesn't view himself as a servant or a child of the house. He wants to master the house.
He wants to know what the house can do for him.
Exactly. That's the only interest he has from it. He's not a part of the house. Mm-mm. The house has no meaning. It's only a thing that might give him power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But continuing the influence of Magician's Nephew a little bit further, you can see the house as the sort of wood between the worlds that you see in the Magician's Nephew, where it's sort of conceived of as the different worlds funnel into this one, and they sort of take the form of statues or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And another one of the characteristics of the wood between the worlds in Magician's Nephew is being in there makes you forgetful. You eventually assume you've always been in the wood between the worlds, and there is no world outside of it. You don't
Right.
stop to think things through. Like you mentioned this, Mandy. Piranesi, he knows that things called foxes exist in fawns, and he knows that bees exist because he's seen their statues. He's
Right.
never seen them in real life,
Mm-mm.
but he knows about them enough to recognize them in the statues, but he doesn't investigate that because
He
to
never
him,
questions
yeah,
where his knowledge came from.
he assumes he's always been in the house, and that's enough for him because of what the house does to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then
So,
can I read a little snippet?
oh, absolutely.
From page 15, this is where I think, did I text you about this? Where I'm like, I think I recognize that guy. I think I did. On page 15, he says, there are some statues I love more than the rest. The woman carrying a
Oh,
beehive is
yeah.
one. Another, perhaps the statue that I love above all others, stands at a door between the fifth and fourth northwestern halls. It is the statue of a faun, a creature half man and half goat, with a head of exuberant curls. He smiles slightly and presses his forefinger to his lips. I have always felt that he meant to tell me something, or perhaps to warn me of something. Quiet, he seems to say, be careful. But what danger there could possibly be, I have never known. I dreamt of him once. He was standing in a snowy forest and speaking to a female child.
Yep.
Oh my gosh! Did I text you about that,
Oh,
Matthew?
here it is. Here it is.
Oh, now he has them.
So you said, so you texted me, hee hee. I did make a very happy sound when I saw the reference to Mr. Tumless and Lucy.
Yeah.
Then you had like a tears and eyes emoji. It is
Yes.
such a weirdly engaging and wonderful book.
Yes. And then I didn't know that it was so engaging that I was going to keep bothering you after that text.
I enjoyed following your progress in real time.
I seriously, I think that gave me like tears in my eyes because I was just like, oh, I don't know. There are probably references in here. Like, is the beehive, the bee lady, a reference to something that I'm not aware of? All I saw was Magician's Nephew and Narnia.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a Narnia vibe to a lot of the statues, right? They're either direct references or at least kind of attitudinal references, like the fox teaching like the little bunnies school. Like, I don't think that was in Narnia, but that's Narnia, right? We get it. It's a whole Narnia vibe.
Yes, yes.
So you can see that is absolutely one of the primary influences is C.S. Lewis, Chronicles of Narnia. I think you can also see a lot of C.S. Lewis's space trilogy in the book, where the character of the other is really, really analogous to Weston when he's going to Mars and out of the Silent Planet. Like they have the same attitude going in, right? Like whereas the Martians, what is it, Thulkandra, they have this attitude like, again, they're very connected to the world. They feel like there's a part of it. Their world is filled with meaning. And then Weston, this evil, I guess, no, he's not American. He's English, but he's human.
English.
This evil human from Earth. He comes and he has the attitude of the others. Like, I'm going to enslave you. I'm going to take your natural resources. I'm going to take your power. I just care about this for what it can give me.
Well, and then all the water too, like for Paralandra, I mean.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
the isolation of the islands in Paralandra could be like the isolation of the house. I don't know. What do you think, Christina?
Christina is looking very intently through her book. I'm guessing she's going to have a passage to share with us. But no, that's a good point, Mandy. The Paralandra, and that the isolation is another theme that gets brought up a lot with this book.
Yes.
Because by happenstance, obviously Susanna Clarke didn't plan this. This book came out during the pandemic, so a lot of us read it in quarantine, and it's again by happenstance fits very nicely with the theme of the book because this is another tension that we see. Mandy, you talked about some other tensions that you had where between confusion and wanting to know more. Here's a tension between at one and the same time, Piranesi feels very much at home in his world. He's a child of the house. But at the other side, you can see that he's very lonely. You can see this through the fact that he takes such fastidious care of all the bones of the prior people.
I
He
know.
he
That's so
cares so much about
sad.
talking with the other, even though, frankly, the other is not really giving him great conversation. He seems lonely and afraid to leave this world at the same time. And it's a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah, definitely.
And
And
then
then,
you can see that. Oh, go ahead.
no, you go ahead, because I was going to
Okay.
change.
I was going to say, and then you can see toward the end when, the other human, our Raphael, comes and it's like,
Yes.
hey, do you want to come back to like Earth? He's
Yeah.
unsure because like stepping out from this isolation, even though he is very lonely, is still a really daunting thing. And the
Mhm.
readjustment to the world is still a pretty daunting thing. So you can see both things played out at the same time. And again, Susanna Clarke, she balances the tension really beautifully.
Yeah.
All right.
There's
Christina,
yeah.
are you ready with your quotation? I can tell you've
Yeah,
been looking
no,
really hard for it. Do you have it?
I'm so silent. I'm back deep engaged in the text. No, I did have a reference I was thinking of, but I couldn't find it in the book. But I mean, I know it's here. But Clarke is she's such an educated person. She is a Christian. She's very intelligent, and so her book, of course, is chock full of all kinds of theology and literary references that you guys have already mentioned, and so many more, including, I didn't realize this until I had listened to a podcast that Joy had done with Malcolm Guite, and Malcolm Guite is one of Clarke's good friends, and I know, isn't that so cool? I know. We love Malcolm, and therefore, by extension, we love Susanna. But that's okay. We didn't really need to be convinced because we loved her books. But that's okay. But anyway, apparently, the albatross experience, which that's what I was looking for. I was trying to find the exact reference to the albatross experience, but she, from what I understand, pulled that reference on the we haven't actually said his actual name, but Matthew Rose Sorensen, the house dweller, beloved child of the house, from the Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel.
There we
Taylor
go.
Coleridge.
Oh, see,
Yeah.
I thought it was Voyage of the Dawn Treader because the albatross whispers in Aslan's voice, "Courage, dear heart."
Well, actually, it's a little bit of both.
Awesome.
Uh-huh. I know. So that's what I mean. Like
Yeah.
Clarke she's so steeped in this goodness that it's just when you read this book, there's way more than this poor, unreliable narrator even knows. So, even that, I think, as a reader, you just trust because the author herself is steeped in such literature.
Right.
But anyway, that's why I was trying to find the Rime of the Ancient Mariner is stunning, and of course, the albatross is a Christ figure, and the person. Forgive me in my uneducated use.
The Ancient Mariner.
The Ancient Mariner, yes, shoots down the albatross, of course, and the whole story is about, or the poem is about, his regret because of all the curses that come to him, et cetera, and yet there's this sort of forgiveness at the end and realizing that the albatross has indeed forgiven and never did, it's just this beautiful experience. And the albatross in this book, who visits the house while Matthew Rose Sorensen is, again, talking and experiencing with the birds, communicating with them or whatever, and just watching them, has a very, very powerful experience, and it bleeds into the rest of the story. But, again, I couldn't find the page. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Do
when the
know the reference
comes?
Yeah, when the albatross comes. I cannot find it.
Yeah, I don't have the page, but yeah, that is one of the more significant scenes in the early part of the book, and you can tell it's significant in the way that Piranesi, the moniker given to Matthew Rose Sorensen, keeps track of time, because each journal entry will be a different day, and they'll be like 5 months and 2 days since this occasion, and the albatross arriving is one of his markers of time, and I love that. There's the symbolic value of the albatross, which you already discussed. But then there's
Right.
just the fact that it shows the attitude of Piranesi and the way he views his world with wonder, where the fact that he saw a specific kind of really beautiful bird, that's so amazing to him that he uses it to track time. Like that's
Right.
Yes.
that's a person who is in awe of the world around him.
Well, and I think that was my first clue. The way that he was tracking time was my first clue that maybe he was a person in the real world, quote unquote, and maybe wasn't in an asylum, because he was looking at his journals and he had the dates 2013 and 2014, and then he shifts to tracking time by events instead of numbers. But then I think he says something like, but of course that was 200 years ago or something. So she like tries to trick us. She's like, not tries to trick us, she does trick us, where you're kind of like, was he originally writing in 2013 and 14, or is this 200 years in the future? We're not really sure. So yeah, I'm not sure where the albatross is, but I think your point is well made. I see gulls, nests and attacking gulls. I'm not sure.
I just found it. It's on page 30 through
I
33.
was way too far on. Go ahead.
No, I was too at first. That's why I was confused. Yeah, it's so interesting. It's too like wow, too. What does that even mean? Too true? I don't know what I was trying to say. But this the thing going back to Piranesi and how he viewed the house. There's this, I remember when I was reading it, it almost felt like the house was sort of a savior figure / God figure, and also sort of brotherly or fatherly figure. And yet it was so mysterious. And it was also dangerous. And so that, of course, reminded me of, well, I don't know if I thought this consciously at the time, but you know, even in Back to Narnia, of course, which, is he safe? Well, of course he's not safe, but he's good, right? There's this point where Piranesi says, it used to be that I dared not live too close to the tides, the tides of the ocean and all that. When I heard their thunder, I ran and hid myself. In my ignorance, I feared to be caught in their waters and drowned. But then, of course, as this is early on in the book, and as he goes on, he explains how, his curiosity and his trust for the house made him venture further on. And of course, this house blesses him with different things that he needs to survive, different kinds of food sources. And this is, where he meets this, this albatross, and he gives this albatross, I think it's like some kind of net or fish, something off his back to help the albatross find a nest for his babies.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just, for some reason, for me, there was just some sort of divine element that, even though, like, this is not, a theological commentary, for me, there was something so enticing about being a child of the house. Like, I almost wanted the house to love me and to be my, guide, master, whatever. I don't know.
But then later you're like, but wait a minute. Like I felt that way. And normally I don't really write in books. My mom made that, she would say, books are our friends, and tell me not to write.
That's cute though.
And so, well, it is, but my daughter Bethany annotates like crazy, and I love it.
I annotate and underline it.
She color codes her annotations, and she chooses 2 different colors for different books. Like she chooses.
I color code some of mine too. Hey.
Oh, you and Bethany, man.
You should form a club.
Nice.
You should. No, but I have told her she has to read Piranesi. But this is, I don't know that I have annotated a novel without being told to, ever. And I did with this one. Not much, still sparing, because it's something that I don't tend to do. But and now I don't remember what I was saying.
Oh, we were talking about being a child of the house and how
so I remember early on, I was like totally tracking with the house being a symbol of a savior or God the Father or one or the other. But then as I got further on, I was like, oh, but wait a minute. I don't know. I feel like the house might be malevolent. And so there you go again with the tension that Susanna Clarke masterfully, puts in the narrative.
Can we go, like, I know we're already running out of time, which is rough because it's such a good story. I know. Can we like fast forward a bit and kind of like towards the end of the book, because obviously there's some big reveals and just sort of, there's a couple different takes on, I think even like, before we started recording, we were even talking like Mandy and Matt and I even disagreed as to like whether or not this world was real or not, because Piranesi, his name is really Matthew Rose Sorensen, and he was kind of like half tricked into getting stuck in this world, and there's like magicians and they're trying to capture him in experiments on this magic world. And anyway, there's this really stunning takeaway, but also it's not like a takeaway.
That's exactly what's fascinating is she leaves you with the question.
It's a question
and with tension.
There's tension, and yet it's so beautiful either way. And that's hard, I think, for authors, for a good author to give you a takeaway that you need to digest yourself. And no matter which takeaway, which, choice you choose, has beautiful,
implications.
Implications. That's the word. Yeah, that's rare. So I kind of wanted to just pull back or fast forward, I guess, to fast forward and just kind of review that and just talk about our experiences coming to the end of this book and what did we take away, for lack of a better question.
Well, and it's interesting because when we were talking in the green room, like, because I said, because Jane, also friend of the podcast, Jane Sharl, who published a play, which we need to talk to her about that.
Oh, yes, it's on Amazon. Write a review. It's amazing.
It's on more than just Amazon. I'm anti-Amazon.
Well, yes, but Amazon is like, everybody knows Amazon, so I'm just saying.
We can do a podcast.
Leave a review on Amazon and someplace else of your choice.
I have not bought anything from Amazon for 4 years, and you can survive. But also they're actually they're staging her play in New York, but we really should talk to her about that. But anyway, she is a Piranesi fan. We talked about it. That was the first I'd heard of the book, is when we did a roundtable with Jane, and we were talking about books that impacted us from 2022 or 21. I don't know. Anyway, but I asked her immediately, I'm like, do you think the place was real? Is the house real? And she said, I'm a nut, but yes. And I sort of go, I don't know, it depends on when you ask me. But my initially I was like, I don't feel like it's real. So I'll state my case and then y'all can state, because this is what makes the book so, I'm going to go back to the word delicious, because it could be any, and I'm not mad. It's not the kind of thing where I'm mad if someone disagrees with me, because it's so cool to think about. But for me, I tend to think, because one of the guys in the book that was held captive, there was another guy that was held captive before, that Lawrence Ayres held captive. And of course, the other is Val Kettering.
Kettering.
And he was a disciple of Ayres. But the guy that Ayres, he actually held him captive in his basement. And so for me, the fact that guy really was in a basement, which I guess you could argue maybe anyway, whatever. So to me, that guy, the guy that was released years before, was in a basement, but thought he was in the world. Also, the multivitamins that get mentioned several times, and that Val gave Matthew a cup of coffee before the world changed, makes me feel like it was both. Like he was drugged, and then he was taken to a place that, because of the state he was in, he believed, he saw the columns and stuff, but then that's too boring. And that also where did the ocean come from? And then where did Val where did Val actually go? Because he really did buy a boat, like an inflatable boat, and his body is gone. So is the other plane like a whole other plane, or is it in this world and a place of the mind? You know, what's y'all's
Yeah,
take?
it sort of reminds me of what you see in a lot of Edgar Allan Poe's fiction,
Oh
where it
yeah,
works. You could do a reading on either level, right? So a
yes,
lot of Poe's stories, you could be like, oh, this narrator, he's crazy. He's, loving the opium pipe a little bit too much and he's just hallucinating. Or you can say, oh, here's a character who's having an actual encounter with the supernatural. Either
right,
one works. So I
yeah.
do think you can say either reading works. And to that point, one of the things that I find the most fascinating about the house under either reading is what it does to the character of Matthew Rose Sorensen, because
Yeah.
we find out
Yes.
from the journals that he eventually finds that before he went into the house, he was kind of a jerk. Like, he's a smart aleck, he's a know-it-all. He basically goes to investigate the other and all of his group to make fun of
He's
him.
a journalist. Yeah. Very much an obnoxious person.
An
Yeah,
obnoxious
but then
journalist.
he goes into the house, and again, he almost regains his state of innocence. Like, he's almost like an Adam character by the end. He
Right.
has no cynicism, he has no guile. He's not he's the opposite of what he was. Then when he comes out of the house at the end, he has this passage toward the end of the book where he's like, yeah, I'm not Matthew Rose Sorensen anymore. I don't recognize that dude. That's not me. I guess I'm also not Piranesi anymore.
Right.
I'm like this third person now. That's kind of this combination of both. So that effect that the house has on him, I think is completely fascinating.
I need to read it again.
And you also see,
yeah,
and you also see, we're kind of closing down, unfortunately, in terms of time. But I love one of these last passages. He's walking through the streets back in the real world. And he's looking around at like all the people that pass him in the city street. He notices, an old man will walk past, and it reminds him of a statue of an old man he saw in the house. And he's sort of musing on all of this. And the final line is, the beauty of the house is immeasurable, its kindness infinite. So he sort of takes this viewpoint of the house back into like the quote unquote real world, seeing pieces of the house in like the faces in the all of the people around him.
So even if it's not true, it's true.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is too, what I love about all this is that, again, it kind of depends on, well, it doesn't depend. It's actually, like kind of the point, like Susanna, or I should call her Clarke, in her brilliance, right? There's two journal passages that close the book. And the idea that, yes, depending, it doesn't matter if the house is real or not. The idea or the concept of someone, Ketterly, and then the other, trying to, just insert him or herself, like himself, into this world to discover it, to reason it out, to figure out its secrets, to discover the power of it, to claim it, to conquer it, right? And then you have, this obnoxious journalist who goes in and is overcome by its beauty. And yes, he is under a spell of some kind, like you said, like the vitamins or whatever, Mandy. Like, there is something that's, it's not like he's just walking in and being like, oh, I'm overcome, He's under its spell, right?
Some kind of spell.
Yeah, exactly. Some kind of spell. But it's clear that as he comes out, unlike the other, who, like, there's references in the beginning, like, Piranesi will say things like, well, he wanted to go see this, but I knew that he wouldn't want to because it would be too much for him. And, he's referring to like, well, I traveled days past this tide and this, 110th vestibule or whatever, but I know the other wouldn't want that. He has too many important things to do and he wouldn't travel past the third vestibule or whatever, but you have this understanding that he has explored and been like just craved the beauty. And when he comes back, he is changed and it is different. And this second to last entry says, he says, "In my mind are all the tides." Entry for 30 November 2018. And he says this, he says, "In my mind are all the tides, their seasons, their ebbs and their flows. In my mind are all the halls, the endless procession of them, the intricate pathways. When this world becomes too much for me, when I grow tired of the noise and the dirt and the people, I close my eyes and I name a particular vestibule to myself. Then I name a hall. I imagine I am walking the path from the vestibule to the hall. I note with precision the doors I must pass through, the rights and the lefts that I must take, the statues on the walls that I must pass. Last night I dreamt that I was standing in the 5th Northern Hall facing the statue of the gorilla. The gorilla dismounted from his plinth and came toward me with his slow knuckle walk. He was gray-white in the moonlight, and I flung my arms around his massive neck and told him how happy I was to be home. But when I awoke, I thought, I am not home. I am here." And I just think, wow, that's so powerful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how you interpret it. There is a beauty in that. I am not home. I am here. He is changed. And he's changed for the better. And in that experience of change, and it is the transformation of love and hope and being a better person, a good person, a lover of beauty and a lover of people and things. And yeah, not that cynical jerk of a journalist, went to try to discover scandal.
Because the beauty of the house is immeasurable. Its kindness infinite.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
All right. Well, that is just the right note to end on. So once again, folks, I'm assuming if you've reached this point in the podcast, you've read the book, but maybe reread it. And while you're at it, read Jonathan Strange, Mr. Norrell. Again, one of my favorite books in the whole world. Susanna Clarke is 2 for 2 in her novels. Thank you both for joining me on the Piranesi Book Club. And as you all can tell, things are winding down at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. The fire is down to embers, the customers are trundling home, and you have polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. If you have maybe 30 seconds or so to spare right now, why not rate and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Either way, we really appreciate you all listening, and we will catch you next time.